So the report I compiled is the CIA played a large part in the 2011 Syrian civil war that killed 350,000 people. Now, that's not just a minivan full of children here. This is a lot of people. Does this surprise you, this headline?
No, not one bit. I mean, it's kind of been a known thing that us in the, quote, tanky spaces have been talking about for a while. Most of your sources will end up, if they don't come directly from, they will end up being compiled on the Gray Zone website, which gets regarded as Russian propaganda. But that's another Ben Norton project. But they've been talking since 2014 about the, was it like the nerve gas that was purported to be used by the quote-unquote moderate rebels in this operation. And it turned out, they were supposed to have been used by Assad on the rebels and like on his own people, who were just like fed up with their government, its oppressive regime, and they were rising up using Twitter as like the organizational technique, right? That's like the whole Arab Spring story. Yeah. When in reality, it was the quote-unquote moderate rebels that the U.S. and the West was supporting that was covertly getting this gas and using it on civilians.
Okay.
Because you would find that and that's what most people think. Like literally, most people have that interpretation of it because that's the only thing that was publicized here. But it's odd when the canisters themselves have like U.S. manufacturer labels on them. It's like, how would Assad get those as opposed to the rebels that were being supported by the West?
Par for the course. Par for the course for the United States. This is a country that prides itself on meddling in the affairs of other countries. Not surprised whatsoever. And of course, we have a long history of wanting to desperately pin the blame on Syria, but not be able to because they have alliances with people that we can't necessarily just go to war with. But it boiled over in this conflict, and now we've been locked in sort of a proxy conflict with Russia and Syria and a lot of other belligerents in this region for a long time. I was surprised to learn about the extent of it recently. So here, I'll actually read a little bit. Look, the CIA's covert role in fueling the Syrian conflict has been one of the deadliest and most destructive conflicts of the 21st century, claiming hundreds of thousands of lives and displacing millions. Okay? While the roots of the conflict lie in the Syrian government's brutal crackdown on pro-democracy protests in 2011, see, that's where the narrative splits. The CIA's covert program, known as Timber Sycamore, played a significant role in fueling and prolonging the violence. In 2012, the CIA launched Timber Sycamore, a covert operation to arm and train and fund rebel groups fighting against the Syrian government Bashar al-Assad. The program aimed to weaken Assad's grip on power and force him to negotiate a political transition. Over the course of several years, the CIA trained and equipped nearly 10,000 rebel fighters at a cost of $1 billion per year. The rebels received weapons, ammunition, and other military equipment, primarily funded by Saudi Arabia and other U.S. allies in the region. So this is something that the CIA and the United States decided was a good idea.
They would never.
You believe that?
Regime change? Can you imagine that? I saw... I want to correct something that I said on one of our earlier live streams. I had said something like France had killed something like 60 African leaders or conducted that many coups, when in reality it was 22 or 26, I think is the number. It's something like that many since 1963. It's like since the critical period after the Cold War, when it would have been useful for France to kill, to assassinate, or overthrow leaders that were threatening independence, repatriation of resources or wealth in some way that would be like anti-colonial. So just to sort of correct that. But that I think the reason I misspoke is because I was confusing that with the over 60 regime change operations that the U.S. has participated in since the Cold War. And that's only the ones that we know about, and that's like since that Wikipedia article was popularized, which was a few years ago. And there's been at least 2 attempts at coups in Bolivia since that. So,
yeah. always good to get a correction. We're always learning and shifting what's going on in the world. I'm definitely always learning, and I don't really know everything. I'll tell you that much, folks. So this conflict was exacerbated while the stated goal was to facilitate a negotiated settlement. The CIA's covert program had the unintended consequence of exacerbating and prolonging the conflict. It's providing, on purpose, military support to rebel factions, some of which had extremist links. The program fueled the violence and contributed to the destabilization of Syria, which in turn led to an immense amount of suffering, needlessly. Moreover, the CIA's effort failed to achieve their objective by removing Assad from power. Instead, the conflict escalated with the involvement of other foreign powers such as Russia and Iran and the backing of Syrian government, and also the rise of extremist groups like ISIS. ISIS popped its head open out of nowhere, and pretty soon you have 3 different sides battling it out, And actually there was cooperation from the United States, Russia, and Syria to bomb ISIS. So they say, well, we hate each other, but we really hate this guy right here, which is so funny. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my enemy. Well, it goes all ways. The staggering death toll of the civil war in Syria has resulted in immense, sad statistics, with estimates ranging from hundreds of thousands to over 500,000 people killed since just 2011. According to the United Nations, the conflict has claimed the lives of over 350,000 people as far as, March 2023? So this is no walk in the park, folks. This is a real live conflict that's being once again stoked by the most evil empire in the last 100 years, in my opinion, the United States.
I mean, it doesn't even have to be your opinion. It's just objective. Like, that's the whole thing about it. And when we keep running into this resistance from guys like the Ukrainian medic, or even guys like Zach, who purports to be like a leftist activist, journalist or whatever, media figure online from Moneyless Society, nice guy. Like, I'm not going to shit on any of his activism or any of his work. Like, I'd love to have him back on and talk to him at any time. But I think he still takes this kind of idea that, there are other empires, that there are other countries that, just because they do bad things, like objectively horrific atrocities, war crimes, human rights violations or whatever, that constitutes imperialism, that this constitutes some kind of empire and an ambition that they simply do not even have or have the capability to exercise compared to the U.S., which is objectively doing that on a daily basis, and we're living in that world. We have been ever since the end of World War II.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that if the shoe was on the other foot, that other countries like China and Russia, once they get the ability to do the same sort of neo-colonialist stuff, would they do it? Well, it's yet to be seen. We don't know for sure. There's some elements there that say, yes, they're picking up some of the tactics that the IMF does, but honestly, what they're doing is more tangible infrastructure is built, and the loans that they give come with less strings attached. So it's hard to say, but we definitely are taking the cake now as far as being just a bad mammer jammers, just some bad people who just treat people like crap abroad and domestically. So, and that's the United States raison d'etre. That's what can I say. Somebody in the
objectively, no one even comes close. Sorry.
Somebody in the comments says Saudi and UAE received a lot of money to fund those groups. Yeah, that's absolutely true. The Saudi is following our lead with some of the same sort of strong-armed military dominance techniques and stuff. And even though you'd think they'd be with people that would be more Muslim or more from that area or something, they really are happy to go after places like Yemen and put a stranglehold on them, just like they put the stranglehold in Gaza. But that's how it goes. And Mike, you know the history of the CIA overthrowing foreign governments. Don't get me wrong, right?
Extensive. I have part of Operation Gladio is involved in that. I'm not going to say it's the entire reason for the CIA's involvement in overthrowing governments, but it is a major reason, is the fight of communism, or the purported fight of communism. Because a lot of times it wasn't really fighting communists, it was just fighting labor organizers, literal just poor people who wanted better working class or working conditions. Just some of the poorest, most impoverished people have found themselves the enemies of some of the worst, most evil, and most well-armed and funded intelligence agencies, simply for wanting better for themselves and other people. It's kind of mind-blowing sometimes.
Yeah. And I just wanted to tell everybody who didn't know already. I mean, I'm sure everybody really does know, but the CIA has a history, and I'll just read off some stuff in case you don't know. Iran, 1953, the CIA orchestrated a coup d'etat against Iran's democratically elected prime minister after he nationalized the oil. So they wanted to keep the oil of their country in their country. They didn't want any more people from abroad coming in, taking it, saying, oh, well, we've got the technology to get it out of there, so we'll split it with you 90-10. They nationalized oil. Now, I'm a big nationalist fan in the sense that I think that if that's your natural resources that come out of your land, you should have the ultimate say. And the people of that country should democratically decide, where does our cobalt go? Where do all of our pretty rocks go? You should decide that. That's why we're having issues in the Congo, where it's the richest country in the world with resources. They've got it all, but they're the poorest country as far as the way they live, their infrastructure, their government, everything. That doesn't make any sense. Somebody's getting the raw end of the deal. And me, I want things to be nice and fair and all Hakuna Matata. It would be nice if people could pay full price for the stuff they need. Okay. Guatemala, 1954. They carried out a coup under the name Operation PB Success to overthrow the democratically elected Guatemalan president, Jacobo Arbenez. His land reforms were seen as a threat to the CIA and the United Fruit Company's business interests. The guy that ran the United Fruit Company, the banana guy, was brothers with the CIA guy, Alan Dulles. So they were actually looking out for each other, I'm sure, on the highest level. So, of course, the Congo, Patrice Lumumba, he was one of our most famous kind of leftist icons. CIA overthrew the Congo in 1960, and it was a democratically elected prime minister, Patrice Lumumba. He was seen as just too close to the Soviet Union, so the CIA had aided his opponents and funded an opposition party, like they do, to overthrow the government. And of course, everybody knows about Chile, 1963. They overthrow the socialist Salvador Allende, and then they go ahead and throw in the Pinochet, who ended up lasting three decades and died of old age. He was a fascist, and he was not a good person. So there you go, folks. It's a tricky world, and the United States is leading the parade in weird, senseless violence.
Yeah, going back to something you said earlier about countries that are often rich in resources being the poorest, that is often a point that Michael Parenti would make a lot. And I think the quote is something like, the poor countries are not poor, only the people are poor. The poor countries are rich. They're rich in resources, they're rich in material wealth, but they're overexploited. They're not underdeveloped. And if you Google some of that, just put those words into Google, you will find some speeches from him, or just look up Michael Parenti, it's just parent with an I at the end. Look up any of his speeches, the Yellow Parenti speech in particular. It's about 45 minutes to an hour, and it's pretty famous for radicalizing people, for showing them the true nature of existing socialist countries and then what has been done to them by the same exact empire that we have been talking about this whole time, in a way that really just opens people's eyes to the extent of the horrors that have been conducted to that end. Parenti's still alive. He's unfortunately not mentally doing so great, but Yeah, he's a great figure that has helped a lot of people to see the light. So he's a great guy.
Yeah. Michael Parenti, yeah, I got to check more of his stuff out because I've seen him speak here and there. Seems like he's on the level. He's got a lot to add to Chomsky-type figure. Crazy, man. Yeah.